curled up reading your favourite art book and you need to stop for some reason. If only you had a little watercolour bookmark to keep your place safe. You might have already made a watercolour bookmark like this, but have you ever made a corner bookmark? The corner bookmark just fits over the corner, surprise, surprise, and keeps your place for you. Join me as I give you 3 different ideas of how to make the corner bit of it, and then we'll decorate them. My name's Liz Chaderton. I'm a watercolour artist based in Berkshire. Every week I share tips and tricks I wish I'd known about ages ago. This week it's a fun project to make a corner bookmark and at the same time practice all sorts of watercolour skills. Before we get on to the fun bit of this, which of course is the painting, we need to do the functional bit, which is the corner that goes over the page. So I've got 3 options because I love giving options. The easiest is to get an envelope. Now, if you've got an envelope that's really nice quality, maybe left over from wedding invitations or the sort of thing that you write to the king on, you'll be happy because you might even be able to watercolour straight on it. But if you've got an envelope like this left over from a card or junk mail, we're going to have to stick paper onto this. So first thing to do is to make sure it's actually stuck down, otherwise it'll fall to pieces. Then of course we can just cut the corners and we will get 4 because this happens to be a square one. I'm going to make them all the same size. So I will be cutting off and wasting a whole ½ centimetre. You can just cut this by hand, or if you've got a guillotine, of course, you are laughing. Don't worry if you've got where it's all stuck down, because we're going to end up putting a piece of watercolour paper over this, so that's going to be hidden. This is the easiest option, and maybe if you've got some nice envelopes, you know, something comes in a gold envelope or whatever, you know, that would be fantastic, and you could make a little stash of these. The second option is probably quite obvious, is just to use a piece of watercolour paper. So I've cut a 7.5 square, or 2 7.5-inch squares, and I put a little tab on this one. I've folded them in. To get nice crisp lines, the best thing is to score across where you want to fold with the sort of the back or the blunt bit of a pair of scissors. Fold it in, and then run the scissors along those folds, get really crisp folds. We will then end up sticking that little tab, which I'm not going to do now because it'll be easy to paint with it flat. And of course, that can go there. Then option 3 is a little bit of origami. You can get little origami stacks like this with lots of yummy colours. But if you haven't got these sorts of pieces of paper, of course you can just use photocopier paper or any pattern paper. You couldn't do it with watercolour paper simply because it's too thick for the fold. And side down, and let's fold it in half. The neater your folds, the neater the end results. Then bring the point up to the corner. Again, fold nicely. Make sure that's well folded and bring those together. Being a bit naughty already. Okay, I'll turn that round. Open it out to the triangle and just put 1 bit down to the point. Again, just make sure that folds nice. Then we take this bit of the triangle, fold it up, and we tuck it into there. And we do exactly the same with the other side. So it's up, and we tuck it down there. Make sure it's poked right down, and then nail across there, and we have a little corner piece. This flap is only 1 piece of paper. This is, I don't know, 1, 2, I think five deep, and that's why we just couldn't use watercolour paper. If you like, what you can do, let's just fold the back over just to get a nice fold. Then we can tuck that inside and we end up with a triangle, if that is your preference. And that can just fit over the corner. So we have 3 options for the functional bit. Now we can start thinking about the decorative bit. So I've got a little piece of watercolour paper. It is 300 grams per square metre or £140. And if you want a little clean border, just tape it off. For this one, I thought I'd just do a tiny landscape. Grab your watercolours and, as always, give them a little spray just to activate. I'm going to start off, so very simple landscape. So I'm putting a stripe of blue, that looks like cobalt blue, across the top, and that is my sky. Let's mix up a little bit of phthalo blue, and I've just put a teeny bit of black in there to make it a little greyer in the distance, and I'm going to put in a stripe across for some distant sort of hills, or just for distant landscape, and touch across there. The watercolour gives me lovely little distant trees. If they go too far, you're just going to have to wait and let everything calm down a bit and get a bit drier. So I'm spreading that out. Now I might want to make it a bit greener as it comes towards me, so I'm adding a little bit of yellow. And I'm going to put a stripe there. Let's add a little bit more. Maybe a brighter yellow, just to make it a little greener. Separate that out again. I'm rather fond of a stripy landscape. I'm just grabbing a little bit of sap green, so that's again brighter as it comes towards us, and I can bring that down to the front. I might want to just bridge this in a few places so that's not too stripy. While it's drying, let's mix up bit more green, so I'm grabbing a green out of there, a darker green, and I could maybe put a bit of a hedgerow here, so just dropping it in to the wet paint, letting that feather through. If you want a bit of texture in the foreground, you could go back in with a slightly more concentrated bit of that sap green. Just put some drops in like that, just to break it up and maybe add a little bit of interest. I think it's a good idea to do a few at a time so that you're not just watching paint dry. And now we have 2 options. We can go back in and refine it with watercolour, or we can grab a pen and do a little line and wash. One of the fun things about doing these bookmarks is that it makes you work on a different scale. I don't think I have ever done a painting this tiny before. So I have managed to break out this teeny tiny brush that I've had for years and never used. So now we're responding to the marks on the paper, and here I've done some distant trees and lost the horizon a bit, so I might just wet that over, grab a little bit more of the red and let that feather through and create some sort of distant autumnal type colours. That's what I'm going for. I'm just going to wet over this and let some of that colour bleed down again. I really like that. And then I might have a little bit of a hedgerow here. So wet this stripy field here. Find a darkish green and go back in and just drop that in. And this, I mean, is a very stylized sort of landscape, but we are thinking about it being a landscape. So in the distance, things may be smaller, they may be lighter in tone, you know, just take it into account so that it's plausible even as a stylized landscape. Deliberately dragged my brush through here, so I've got some dry brushing, the paper is showing through. So what shall we do with this? It needs some texture on the foreground. With my teeny tiny brush, put in some stubble of fields. So I'm imagining the crops have been cut and there's a little bit of stubble and grass and things sort of left behind. Leave a little bit of room for imagination. If you are a fan of a bit of splatter, we could always cover that bit up and just put some stones in that front field as well. Fancy the idea of a bit of shadow under these trees. Let's go to the one we did paint together, and I've got a little fine liner. It's a 0.3. Where I put those watermarks, actually they've made some really nice sort of hedgerows, so I'm going to just emphasize those, and I'm going to put some sort of branches and things like that. They may end up looking a bit more like cauliflowers or lettuces than a hedgerow, but I'm just following round the watermarks and then going to put in a few sort of branches and sort of stuff. I'm not going to outline those distant trees because they are far away, less detail, and they worked fine as they were. Maybe I could put a little bit of a hedge, it's not a hedge, a fence here, just to carry on. A couple of fence posts would be fine. If you've got an acrylic pen at all, and I could do a little house. You could use a bit of gouache as well if you like. What are these? These might be daisies in the field. They might be stones and flints. I don't know. I'm just bringing the foreground forward. Just going to do a finer fence back by my house in the distance. Give it a bit of a roof. Better have a chimney. And just with those few simple lines, we've created a little landscape. Let me take the paper off, the tape off. This is always my favourite bit of the process. Do it gently because it's really annoying if the paper tears. Let's do the same with this one. Once you're happy with your teeny tiny landscapes, it's time to construct. If you'd used the watercolour paper option for your corner, you will have painted it on here. So all you need to do is tuck your little tab in, glue it without getting anything on there. If you don't think you can manage that like that, just put a piece of paper underneath so you don't get any glue on, and then tuck that over. That's as simple as that. If, on the other hand, you are either using an old envelope or one of your folded ones, of course you can start to enjoy coordinating. So I've got this very yellow envelope. I want to cover up the bit where the flap was, so I could stick my little landscape on there. I'm wondering, actually, would it look kind of cool if this was slightly smaller and the yellow framed it? Maybe I'll do that. With a steady hand, I am going to trim this. Yeah, I think that'd be quite nice actually. So there, I am going to have that little edge. I don't think I'll have the edge showing on that one, just so that we've got a few things to compare. This one, oh, actually, would that colour work? I think that, yeah, that colour would work, wouldn't it? So again, I think that might be quite fun to cut down, only so that we get this sort of patterned edge to it. This won't work on any of the colours I've got. So let me go through my little block. Oh, come on, that's quite fun. I will make a new corner to go on this one. Again, I'm going to trim this one off. I'm just using a glue stick, simply because that's what I've got to hand. You could use white school glue just to stick these down. So make sure we've got the corner at the top and then position it as you want. Rub it down and put it under something heavy to dry flat. But that's the first of our little bookmarks. This one I'm going to do something slightly different. I want to cover up where the flap was, so that's easy to position. This envelope is not the thickest thing in the world, so what I'm going to do, just to make the back a little bit more stable, I'm folding it over. You just have to watch those corners. And then I am going to tuck that inside. I can even glue it if I want, but I probably won't need to glue it. Let's see. This would have been easier to do. Just use my scissors to poke that right down into the corner. If I'd done this before, I'd stuck the front bit on, but I think I've got away with it. And I just think that'll make it a little bit more hard wearing, because it wasn't the best quality envelope in the world. So that's 2. Let's learn from my mistake and get that inside. And that's just reinforce that edge. Apply glue. Always the edges that are going to lift, so do pay lots of attention to the edges. You don't want them peeling off, do you? That is my front. There we go. That's on with my little yellow border, and all I've got left is my little cottage scene right up to the edges. I've just done it on a gash bit of board so I don't get glue all over my surface. I will put these under a book, heavy book, to make sure they dry nice and flat. There are our little bookmarks. And they will just keep our place in our book. And I thought, paint like Turner. I don't think Turner painted like this, but I think that's an appropriate book to use a little watercolour bookmark in. One final thing you can do, if you are concerned that these bookmarks are going to get a little bit worn, maybe whoever you're giving this to likes to read the book in the bath and all that watercolour might end up coming off on your pages, what you can do is get some wax. Now this is actually furniture wax. The really proper stuff is Dorland's wax. That's for fine art. I'm not counting these as fine art. They're a bit of fun. This works in just the same way. So it is a white paste, and you can just rub it into the surface of your watercolour, just like that. If you don't want to use your fingers, of course, just use a cloth. Rub it in. Doesn't need to be very much. Again, pay attention to corners and edges. You let it dry for probably only an hour, depends how warm it is. And then you can get a cloth and just give it a gentle buff, and it will give a slight sheen, but it also waterproof. It may have been sensible, if I thought about this better, to do the little paintings before I stuck them onto the corner pieces, but I didn't. And the nice thing about the wax is not only does it protect it, waterproof it, it slightly deepens the colours. If you've enjoyed this, can I ask you to give it a bit of a thumbs up or leave a comment, because then I will know that you have enjoyed this. And I've got so many more ideas of how you can do little watercolour corner bookmarks that I'll make another film with those ideas. I've got ideas for a floral, another pen and wash, some nice shaped ones I think would be kind of fun. And though these are a little bit of fun, don't forget that you're learning all the time. So you may think, actually, that colour palette's really nice. I like that. Or, yeah, I really like how, I don't know, the water flowed uphill and formed those trees for me. I'm going to use that in one of my sort of proper landscapes. So even though this is a simple and small fun project, you are learning new watercolour techniques. You're learning more about your colours. And of course, you've got something that you can give as a little present to someone or use yourself at the end.